Some of this stuff, I know I get off track a little bit, but I try to always come back so you can see where I was actually going with all of it. And this nutrient timing part will tie into when we come back to the higher frequency training. Because I don't think you can do the higher frequency training most optimally until you kind of conquer this nutrient timing stuff. Okay. Great question so far too. Keep pumping them out. All right, so we were talking about these studies. There was 3. There's really one big 12-week study. And, we talked about they did 8 exercises, 3 sets of 10 to 75% of their max. Their diets were controlled. They were untrained. They had a placebo group, randomized double-blind study. Really, really, really good stuff. Now let's talk about some of the things that they measured in a little more detail and what they found. Because some of this stuff actually surprised me. Some didn't, but some of it did. So let's talk about cortisol. Cortisol has a very close relationship with muscle protein breakdown. Chances are really good that the more muscle protein breakdown you have, probably the higher the cortisol levels were. And so in this study, this placebo group, these would be the people who had no nutritive interventions. They didn't use anything. Especially their placebo actually was artificial flavoring and citric acid. It probably tasted good. Actually, that's probably indicative of some of the supplements out there. I shouldn't have said that. Okay, so placebo group. So their cortisol, when they looked at their levels after they trained, they were increased 105%. Okay? And after 30 minutes after the workout, they were still at 54%. I'm going to show you this in a graph. It's pretty cool. Now, the carb and the carb plus EAA groups didn't have any increases in cortisol. And actually, their baseline levels actually went lower. That's pretty remarkable. Notice the EAA group by itself didn't give that effect. Now, that's pretty easy to figure out why that probably happened, because EAAs don't have quite the insulin stimulus that a carb would, right? So it makes sense. So what you're seeing there, in my opinion, is just a relationship between insulin and cortisol. Insulin has a direct effect on cortisol. It manages it, keeps it lower. Okay, so 27% less muscle protein breakdown was discovered after 48 hours. So remember I said they did a little study from one workout, and then really they extrapolated over 12 weeks. This is from the Metabolism Clinical and Experimental Journal. 27% less muscle protein breakdown with the carbs and EAA group. That's a real significant number, 27% difference. And if you think about that over a long period of time, because that's really what this is. It's not, as people like to say, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. That is a pretty big percentage. That's a lot less muscle protein breakdown. So does that really mean you're going to get bigger muscles? Well, the 12-week study, this one right here, they actually measured muscle fiber size, the cross-section of the muscle fiber itself. And they found, and I'll show you a graph on this one too, they found that the carb and EAA group had significantly higher cross-section, the muscle fiber was bigger, okay? And they actually, again, this study was really good, they actually measured slow twitch and both fast twitch types. So 1, 2A, and 2B, they actually measured all of them, which I thought was another, wow, man, these guys did a really good job. They did a muscle biopsy, they stuck a needle in their vastus lateralis, which sounds really painful to me. They sucked out muscle tissue. I always wanted to get like biopsies done, but I was scared to. It just sounds really painful. Like actually ripping muscle fiber though, I mean. Maybe it's not, I don't know. All right, so now let's talk about this kind of in simple terms. So glucose, all right. So if you look at the first slide, let me see how good you guys can see this. So the first slide here, the square at the top, that is the carbohydrate and essential amino acid group. You notice their glucose went the highest. And then the triangle below that, see what I'm talking about, is a carbohydrate group. That shouldn't surprise any of you. Carbohydrates and insulin both increase glucose, which causes an increase in insulin. No surprises at all there. I don't think there's any surprises. And then the other two, the EAA group and the placebo group, their glucose levels were pretty much unchanged, which makes sense because they weren't consuming any carbohydrates. Okay? That's what you would expect. That's what I would want to see. And then you look at cortisol. So cortisol concentrations. So the top one, the circle, is the placebo. So these were the people that did not get any amino acids or carbohydrates. Look at their cortisol levels. See how high that spiked? And even 90 minutes after recovery, which is the end of the graph over here, you can see it's still really, really elevated. Now look at the bottom two lines. The triangle facing up is the carbohydrate group, and the square right there is the carbohydrates and amino acids. So what I think is pretty fascinating about this is that the carbohydrates by themselves were actually a tiny, teeny bit better than the carbohydrates and amino acids. So again, carbohydrates are a really powerful tool in your arsenal to control cortisol because of the insulin response you get. Big difference there. I mean, that's a big difference. All right, so the first one over here on the left, insulin. So if you're following along with me, you're probably thinking, okay, the carbohydrate group and the carbohydrate and the essential amino acid group, they probably got a better insulin response, and you're absolutely right. So the circle is the essential amino, wait a minute, insulin. So the circle's at the bottom. The top is actually a square. That's the carbohydrates and essential aminos, and then the right side up triangle is the carbohydrates. So as you would expect, insulin levels are higher in those groups because they're taking in carbohydrates. And if you look at the circle down below, that's the placebo group that didn't get any carbohydrates, and their insulin's low because they didn't get anything. Again, you expect that. Now, here's where the graphs get cool. Here's where I think they get really cool. So this 3-MHIS, this 3-methylhistidine, this is an index that measures muscle protein breakdown. This is a big deal. This is a really big deal. This is the most important slide, I think, of all of them. Because remember what I was talking about a half hour ago, we wanted to find a way to reduce muscle protein breakdown that would allow us to train more frequency. Bam, there it is right there. Look at the top, the very top, at the top of the graph, the circle is the placebo group. So look at their levels of muscle protein breakdown. It's at the very top. Now, if you go down to the bottom, that's the carbohydrates and essential amino acids. Now look at how theirs dramatically drops. Very, much less measure of 3-methylhistidine than the placebo group. Very, very big deal. And if you look too, they're measured over the course of 48 hours. And if you look at the placebo group, what's happening with the measure? It continues to go up. You see how over the 48 hours, after 7 and now to 10, you see that 48 hours, it's still going up. Like you didn't not only got muscle protein breakdown after you got out of training, it kept going up. And this is what I tell people, a gentleman just asked me about training fasted. We know that when you train fasted with no nutrients in you, we know the muscle protein breakdown skyrockets. That's why I'm not a big fan of it if your goal is muscle hypertrophy. But again, if you look at the clear leader at this in reducing, the index is lowest when you use aminos, carbohydrates. It actually starts going down, it just keeps going down. Now, to me, this means that equation we talked about is much easier to deal with now. Muscle protein synthesis, muscle protein breakdown. Now it's much easier to deal with because you didn't dig that deep ditch 4 or 5 feet. Now you look at this and you say you didn't dig it deep at all. It's actually lower than the starting point. Pretty impressive. And again, what critics would say is, well, meat in your diet can artificially inflate that. Well, they controlled that in this study. They didn't even let them eat meat as part of the nutrition program. So, and I think that 48 hours, see, if we talk about high frequency training, I think you always want to give 48 hours until you train a muscle group again. So if you train on a Monday, then you want to come back on a Thursday or Friday. That 48 hours is a really good indicator. What I like about this study is at 48 hours, you can see the muscle protein breakdown. There's none. So you should be recovered. There's nothing to repair, right? So that's, any questions on that? Yes, sir.
Yeah. Training fasted, you don't recommend that. How about cardio?
Cardio, fasted or unfasted, I'm one of these old school guys that I think it's more about calories. I think if your goal is to burn body fat, I think it's most important that you end up in a caloric deficit. And by doing cardio, it's activity and it equals calorie burn.
But do you think that fasted cardio would have an impact on your leg training, for example, when you think about the response here?
Okay, so that's a really good question. I like that. So I think the question is, if you do fasted cardio, you're saying potentially you get some more muscle protein breakdown, and will that affect your leg training? That is a great question. Here's what I would say. The deeper you are into a diet, the harder it is to recover. So the deeper you are into a diet, the higher your chance of fasted cardio impacting your legs. I would also say this. So you have this question of HIIT cardio versus low intensity cardio. The harder your intensity is, the HIIT will produce a lot more 3-methylhistidine. So the people that I have competing, I tend to have a little bit hit early in their program, but when we get down to the last 6 weeks, 5 weeks, there's no hit in it at all. Because recovery is at a premium at that point. You're in a caloric deficit, you're not exactly full of energy. I mean, the reality is it's hard the last month, and I want people to be able to train hard, and I want people to be able to recover. I'd rather see them have to recover from training than recover from cardio.
And on that, do you have any experience on supplementing with EAAs and carbs with cardio during the final stages of contest prep?
Yeah, so that's another really good question. So the question is, what do you think about carbs or aminos before cardio? I personally like essential aminos before cardio to protect muscle, but the essential aminos, and you can tell by these graphs, they don't have a massive effect on helping. The essential amino, if you look, is the downward triangle. See, it's right in the middle. But it did help some. It did help some. I don't like for people to eat a meal and do cardio just because this doesn't feel right. I mean, you eat a big meal and you go to cardio. It just never felt right to me. But a little aminos to protect your muscle a little bit, and that's what I do personally.
Yeah. And you haven't seen that affect fat loss?
No negative effects at all. No.
But some people go crazy about that. They'll say you could have aminos, but then you're not fasted to take them. But it doesn't impact fat loss then.
Well, there's a couple of different arguments you get. You get the insulin folks will say, well, the leucine is going to elevate your insulin levels, and then insulin is counter-regulatory to fat loss, so then you can't burn any fat. And I would say to that person, again, it comes down to calories.
Wasn't that what Milos was saying back then?
Yeah, but he doesn't say it anymore. He's taught me a few things, and I've taught him a few things. He's an awesome guy. It comes down to calories. And then as far as not being fasted, That's just kind of a stupid argument. The argument isn't whether you're fast or not. The argument is, are you losing body fat or not? And that comes from calories. That's just kind of an argument that's circulating. I don't even engage in those kind of arguments because the bottom line is a client wants results. They're not going to ask you, hey, what was my insulin levels today? You know, I mean, they want results. So that is like, I just really, really dig that. They measure that through urinalysis. They use mass spectrometry when they're reading. And when somebody wakes up, the way they did this was they discarded their urine. Then all the rest of the day, when they use the bathroom, they collected it, and that's how they measured this. Very, very, very thorough in the way they measured it. This is pretty neat too, and this really is the whole ballgame right here. This is body composition. And so if you look in the middle, fat-free mass. Now, let me remind you again of what okay, so this now we're into the tool. This was, these charts reflect the full 12 weeks. This isn't reflective of just one session. So this is after 12 weeks. 2 training sessions a week, 12 weeks. This is the results, and they measured, this is from the biopsies. They measured fat-free mass. How much muscle did you have? So look right here in the middle. The first clear line is placebo. They gained, looks like 1.8 to 1.9 kilograms of muscle. Now remember, these people were untrained, so you would expect them to gain some muscle. That's a good thing, right? So they did gain some muscle. And I sure would, and that training protocol I think was really good too. So they did gain some muscle. Now the second line over with the crisscrosses is carbohydrates only. Now look, they're up near 3 kilograms of muscle they gained. Then beside that, the gray line is essential amino acids only during their intra, and they gained just a little bit more, about 3 kilograms over the 12 weeks. And then look at the black line. They're actually 4.1 kilograms of muscle they gained over 12 weeks. And that group, the dark black line, is the carbohydrates and essential amino acids. So let's think about those numbers. 4.1 grams, or kilograms, 4.1 kilograms of muscle added versus 1.8 to 1.9. That's over double the gains, right? That's over double. That's very impressive. I would have been impressed if it was 20% over. That's over 100% over. That's really impressive. So then you look at the fat mass. This is, not a real big deal, but the benefit is, there's still a little bit better benefit to the carbohydrates and aminos. They actually lost, looks like a little bit less than 2 kilograms of body fat during the 12 weeks. What's interesting here is the placebo group actually lost more fat than the insulin and amino groups. So from a body fat perspective, that's a little interesting. It's interesting to me that an amino or a carb-only group would lose less fat than a placebo, but when you added them together, the aminos and carbs, they lost more fat. See what I'm saying? That's just really, that's interesting. I didn't expect that, honestly. But to me, the impressive thing there is the fat-free mass. You've got over double gains in muscle with the carbohydrate and essential amino acid group. Really, really good stuff. Any questions on that? Yeah.
Do you have an idea how this would be, what the impact would be if we replace this concoction with DHB salts, for example, and would be more into the gym?
Ah, look at you. DHB salts. So the question was, what if you replaced the EAA and the insulin or carbohydrate with BHB salts? BHB salts are ketone bodies. Exogenous ketones, they're not, that's a good distinction. Because a lot of people right now are selling keto products and they're telling you when you drink it, they're putting you in ketosis. Is that true?
No.
Hell no, it's not true. No, you get into ketosis through your diet. But I wish it was true, because then I could eat all the pancakes I want, and then just, have some keto factor. Hey, doesn't matter how many pancakes you eat as long as you drink this. But yeah, it's I've been lumped into that too. I've had people call me out, and I said, look, man, you obviously didn't read what I said, because I've said you don't drink this stuff and go into ketosis. I've done a lot of research on this, and the ethers can raise your ketone levels if you want to drink the nastiest, most disgusting jelly you've ever had in your life. These BHB salts that they use are a little different. They can be flavored unless you go massive doses. What I've noticed is I put 4.5 grams in mine because I felt like the 4.5 grams allowed, what I was going for was, like, if you follow me, what I always say is your training should never be compromised. Like, when you get deep into a diet, you should do everything you can to make sure your training sessions hold their integrity. You don't want to get weak. You don't want to, get tired halfway through your workout. But what happens is just sometimes the low calories or low carbs, it just makes it hard, man. It just does. So I wanted a solution for people who were not only on keto diets, but were just on low-calorie diets in general. I wanted something to give them some energy. And BHB salts are really good for that. I mean, they take a little while to kick in. I mean, they're in an intro workout, but truly they're pre-workouts, because they usually take about 30 minutes to start working. But you kind of have this fog that lifts when you take it. You feel sharp, you have some clarity, and you feel really good, and usually for a couple hours. That's what I was trying to do with mine. That's why I wanted a solution for people who just felt like crap to be able to continue to train. It wasn't to induce ketosis into people and make them believe they're burning loads of body fat. And that's actually why I put amino acids in here too. So this doesn't have a carbohydrate. It has essential amino acids, and it has, citrulline and some pump agents in it. But in terms of studies like this, there hasn't been any done. There hasn't been any done. And I would venture to say, just based on what I know now, I would just take a wild guess, and I would say BHB salts are definitely not going to control muscle protein breakdown as well as the carbohydrates. But I feel like there would be some benefit there. And I'm not sure why. But I would not put this on the same level as the one with carbohydrates in terms of managing muscle protein breakdown. But in terms of giving you energy, making you feel good, I have all the faith in the world in that. So it's just different. It's just a different tactic.
But in terms of improving body, like straight body composition, if you would have the option between taking in keto factor and just straight water, or a regular BCA, like 3:1 ratio BCA supplement, that would probably give you a better environment for fat loss than had you not taken it.
I mean, the question is, would BHB salts and aminos create a better environment for fat loss? Well, indirectly is what I would say, because it'll allow you to train harder. That would be the benefit to me. I personally would rather have carbohydrates so I can really control muscle protein breakdown, but everybody's different, and some people like keto diets, and some people just have to go through phases where they're doing carb cycling, where their carbs are really low, and that's a great option for them.
That's the thing, you don't have to go to ketosis in shape.
No, you don't have to go to ketosis. You just have to be in a caloric deficit. It's a preference thing. And some people feel great when their body goes into ketosis mentally. Your brain likes ketones, and that's great. I mean, I've heard people say you can't get into ketosis if you're eating a high-protein diet. The protein turns to gluconeogenesis, right? Like, dude, let me tell you something, man. In the 90s, we were peeling those keto sticks, and we were eating nothing but protein and veggies, and we were all in ketosis. I mean, the notion that you can't get into ketosis eating high protein is baloney. Because our old school way of dieting in the 90s was the keto sticks that you pee on, it has negative, which means it's not detecting ketones. It has trace. It's been a while. There was moderate, was on one end, and that's the most purple, like it would turn purple. The real purple one was moderate, and somewhere around here there was trace. And what we tried to do was tailor our diet so we stayed in trace. So we always had some ketones coming out of us. And we could stay there eating fish and vegetables and small amounts of carbs. Because back then we didn't even eat fat. But when you hear a true keto diet is what? 60, 70, 80% fat? I mean, it's a really high number. Yeah, I mean, it's a really high number, the percentage of fat. But to your question, do you have to be in ketosis? No. No, you just have to be burning more than you're taking in. But that was our way of saying we were burning some fat, you know. And there was just, we didn't even comprehend like the keto diets now. Like we couldn't comprehend that. It was just, you ate your fish, you ate your, it was old school, man, straight old school. But we were on ketosis. And when we went into moderate, we would eat rice cakes to get out of it. Maybe we'd put some jelly on them. I'm not telling you guys to do that. I'm just saying that's what we did back then.
Jelly on the eggs?
Yeah, I love grape jelly on my eggs in the morning. But that's what we did. We'd say, okay, moderate is too much. That's probably when you're eating in a muscle. That's just what we thought. And I still think that's true. I think when you're that deep into it, you're at the risk of muscle loss. So then we'd eat some carbs and we'd try to get it back into trace. A lot of times we'd go negative, but then the next day it'd be back into trace. It was fun. It was fun. That was our scientific way back then. It's a little different nowadays, but it worked, man. I mean, you know, I was 21 years old, and really super lean, and but it was interesting. Okay, all right. Any other questions before I move on?
Do you ever use phosphatidylserine serum to reduce cholesterol?
Yeah, I've used the product that Matt has that has a pretty good load in it, the cortisol. Before the Arnold Classic, the picture, the very first picture of my presentation was from Arnold Classic. I got a bottle of cortisol from him and I ate the whole thing the week before the Arnold Classic because it has that chocolate flavor. I was like, man, I'm just going to eat the whole thing. I ate the whole thing the week before the Arnold. So, I don't know if it helped or not, but it sure tasted good. I'm not smart enough about phosphatidylserine to know if it really, I mean, on paper it looks fantastic. And if I was going to build a product, that was the goal, that would be one of my ingredients I'll put in it. So I think it's a good ingredient personally. All right, I'm going to